Welcome in. It's Clippers Talk Live. I'm Adam Moslin doing this from work again because they won't have me at the apartment being this loud anymore. They kicked me out. It is good to be back with you guys, though. We had a couple of shows, few uploads yesterday, including the official post game upload and then some Clippers Talk After Dark, where at 1 in the morning we had Carlo Jimenez join me from his bedside, I think, to help unpack everything that happened with that Clippers monumental win over the Denver Nuggets, 126 to 122, their eighth straight victory at Intuit Dome. And for more on that big win by the Clippers, we got Brandon Marcus joining us now. At B Marcus is where you find him. Brandon, where can everybody find you now? I know you guys got the new show. I love the jingle you guys have, by the way, on Talking Ship with the introduction. It is beautifully done. So just let everybody know where they can find you and Matt Matawarren.
Great to be back, my guy. We have a lot to unpack there because I need to figure out what's going on at your apartment complex and why neighbors are so upset and why they're Lakers fans. And I also need to find out what you were doing at 1 o'clock in the morning. And if you had to do that podcast from the studio or if you were doing it from your apartment, and that's why they're so angry. We'll get to that in a second. But to answer your question, at BD Marcus on Twitter/X, also at Blue Sky as well. Of course, you got the Talking Shit podcast with Matt, and Matt was the one that actually created that jingle. So that was a homemade Matt Matawarren jingle that has been very, very impressive. That he's done that in the back while trying to also post everything. So good on Matt. Just want to give him a shout out.
He is a very creative guy. We're missing Matt today in this one, but they were doing a home and home.
We are.
Brandon's starting here on the Clippers Talk Live side, and then I'll go on with him and fill in for Matt Matawarren as his co-host on Talking Ship a little bit afterwards. So, Brandon, yeah, I've been basically exiled from my apartment building for being too loud, which is not something I can really help at this point.
So what happened?
So,
How did that occur?
too many late night podcasts, too many Clippers Talk After Dark episodes at 1 in the morning where people are, understandably trying to sleep. And meanwhile, I'm up still excited about Clippers basketball and shouting and screaming and blocking people and giving people timeouts and pulling receipts and, the idiot stuff that I usually do here. So,
And so your
the
neighbors
idiotic stuff.
love next to you, like that you specifically.
Both. I got put in the grinder, both sides. The wall next to me is upset. The people above me are upset. I can't escape. So I just figure I'd come to iHeart and start doing more shows here. And it's only 5 minutes from my home, so it's not too difficult. But speaking of being home, the Clippers are establishing that home court advantage. As I mentioned earlier, they have won 8 straight now after winning last night over the Denver Nuggets. Your final, Clippers by 4, 126 to 122. I think it might be the best victory of the season, Brandon. How do you feel about that?
That's a good one. Because they were certainly an underdog in that game, despite being at home. So I think you can make a case for that certainly being one of the best games or best wins of the season. I'm looking at previous wins to see what may have stood out. And I think you're right. Based on who they've beaten so far. I think the other one may have been at Denver earlier in the year, because that's another one where I think the Clippers were a pretty large underdog and people didn't quite understand who the Clippers were at that point. But yeah, it's the home sweet home, man. And it's funny because we mentioned this on Talking Ship that I got both Matt reaching out to me and I have another friend of mine that reached out to me at the same exact time, being like, "Hey, maybe we'll just go 0 for Intuit Dome." And ever since that, they have not lost a game at home. So clearly the wall is making a difference. Law Murray put out a great tweet earlier today about what the wall has done and how I think it's the lowest free throw percentage of
Yeah,
teams at so it's impressive.
I got it right here. So visitors to Intuit Dome are shooting just 72.7% from the free throw line through the first 6 weeks of the season. That is the lowest free throw percentage for road teams in an arena this season and would be the lowest percentage in the NBA over the last 9 seasons should it hold up. Team shooting just 72.7% at the charity stripe, the opposition at Intuit Dome. So the wall's doing its job. It was the Denver Nuggets missing, I think, 9 free throws last night, 10 of 19. They got the Golden State Warriors to miss 10 free throws. And teams are kind of scratching their heads and wondering what's going on, but I think it's pretty clear at this point. They're a little bit shook at the free throw line because they haven't been in an environment like this, and Clipper Nation is making their voices heard.
Dude, it's great. And it's such a far cry from what the Clippers have dealt with in previous years at Staples and crypto, and just what you look at what it was like to have a home game at LA, at home in the Staples Center. It wasn't even a home game because A, you didn't feel like there were enough Clippers fans. B, it was always the opponent's fans that were louder. And there was no home court advantage. I mean, there really was no advantage whatsoever. And now all of a sudden, you got the MVP at the line late in the game, and he's missing the first of two free throws that are absolutely crucial at the end of the ball game. I mean, stuff like that. How nice is it when you go in any sport to an arena or home field in a football field where there's a true home field or home court advantage? It makes a massive difference. And if that suddenly can become a calling card for the Clippers, boy, that really can swing a couple of games here and there. And that not only will win you games during the regular season, which will give you a better seed at them, but that'll give you wins in the postseason.
Oh, yeah, and we haven't even heard it, in a high magnitude or magnified ball game yet at its peak and what the decibel level could get to. I think it's gotten to about 110 I've seen when they test it out. They show it on the Halo board late in games and have the crowd go wild just to see how loud they can get it there, but it is special. Coach Lou, I think, said the word, "It's been spectacular" for us last night. He gave a lot of credit to it. Mike Malone didn't want to talk about the wall. He was upset post game and said something to the effect of, "The wall's not the one making those turnovers out there." And he gave the Clippers the credit, not the arena. But I think he was just, I don't know. It was somewhat semantics with the way he was talking about it. But we know the effect. Clipper Nation, you're making a big one right now in the opposition with the way they're missing free throws at a high rate right now. Okay, so this Clippers team, they end up winning a ball game where Nikola Jokic still did his thing. He had basically his season averages. He had 28, 14, and 13 assists. He has been averaging a triple-double, but just 2 of 7 from the outside. And you can say the Clippers had two guys maybe that outplayed him in James Harden and Norman Powell. A guy some people didn't want in the starting lineup earlier this year. They didn't want Norman Powell in there, but now he is thriving. He is handling business. I'm
I see what you did there.
taking a dig at Marcus, at Brandon Marcus here. Norman Powell, in his first game back, to put together that type of performance, to come back and look like himself and go 5 of 8 from distance and be that efficient. The Clippers get down by 10 in that third quarter. He knocked down, I think, 3 3-pointers. Harden hit a couple of them to get them right back into it. I can't say enough about the season that Norman Powell is having. And right now, people are starting to talk about it, but the Clippers having this guy at a bargain price, while meanwhile Paul George is making over twice as much in Philadelphia, and they're 4-14 or something like that. It is remarkable that addition by subtraction, what he said at media day, everything is playing out just as he said.
Surprising, honestly, really surprising. And you're right. I mean, I said that it would make more sense for Norm to come off the bench because I thought the bench would have no juice. The bench has been fine for the most part, nothing special, but having that starting lineup and getting that juice initially has been absolutely huge because of what Harden has done as a distributor. Certainly, he had yesterday a great game, scoring 35 plus, which is not going to happen often. But to have his ability to shoot the three ball and it's such a high clip, man. I mean, he was shooting 49% from three and from the field going into yesterday's game. And there was obviously a little bit of concern when he didn't start the second half. But then all of a sudden it turned out it was because of the minutes restriction. And they wanted to make sure that he was available late in the game. And just great management by the Clippers of Norm Powell. And for him to take the extra couple of days, because there was certainly some talk that he was going to come back earlier in the week and that he might be ready. And Harden said to Norm, take care of that hamstring. This is not something we want to get worse. We'll take care of things until you're ready. Finally, it turned out he's ready. He comes into the lineup and he makes a massive difference. So good on the Clippers for making sure that they didn't bring back the guy until he was fully healthy and he was able to contribute, because this team is certainly staying above water without him. But having him just makes this team really take it to the next level.
I brought this up last night. I don't know if it's a hot take. I've heard a few people say it. part of Clipper Nation, of course they're going to say it. I don't
Mhm.
know if the national media has picked up on it yet. I know the efficiency is only starting to get better. James Harden is still shooting under 40% from the field at 38.5% on the season. He's at 34.6% from three. It's really his 2 point percentage that's so far down right now, even though I think over the last 7 games now, he has shot 41% from the outside. And he has talked about and mentioned it post game last night how his legs are starting to feel better, how it takes him more time now, being a little bit of an older guy in the league. But I think there's a case to be made, and it's still too early in the season. Of course, things can change. But if you're talking about the MVPs in this league and guys who could be candidates, I think James Harden has to be included, especially if you're the same media that counted the Clippers out and saying they were going to be a bottom four team in the Western Conference. Well, they're 13-9 now. They look much better in that, and they haven't had a game with Kawhi Leonard and just had Norman Powell miss 6 straight games and still went 4-2. I think James Harden has a case here, Brandon. What do you think?
There's a lot of people that have a case to get certain awards, but you're right. James certainly is up there. He's not going to win it. There's just no chance that he would win it unless the Clippers somehow finish as like a 1 or 2 seed in the West. But for him to get consideration, that's a no-brainer. I mean, the numbers that he's putting up, both scoring, rebounding, assists, steals, and yes, the field goal percentage is not there, but it's because he's having to do so much. And certainly it's something that I want to see him improve upon is that field goal percentage. But where would they be without him? I mean, they would be probably a 4-win team maybe at this point without James Harden, but to see what they've done with him on the floor and for him to play the entire second half yesterday, despite his age, was really, really impressive. And normally you would see some drop off at the end of the game. And frankly, Adam, I think that's another topic for another day, is that the late game execution for the Clippers is certainly something that's a little bit of a concern, given that you're relying on Harden at the end of the game to basically create, and it ends up being ISO ball. And we saw him turn over the basketball when he had to do everything. But for him as an actual basketball player for this Clippers team, he has been light years better than I think even some people thought that he would be coming into this season. I mean, I thought he would be good because he was going to have to do everything. I didn't know he was going to be this good.
Yeah, and the turnovers are, of course, somewhat built in when there's that much expected or that much on your plate and everything that he's having to do and playing the entire second half. And he did have a bad one late, but he also crossed up Peyton Watson like he was
Yep.
Wesley Johnson out there and sent him flying backwards and
Watson
had
was
that
calling for a
big
foul
bucket.
right away. Yeah, Watson was calling for that foul.
And he knocked down 2 free throws late,
Mhm.
which were huge because going back to game one against the Phoenix Suns, they lost that game because they missed free throws down the stretch. This time, he and Norman Powell made their free throws. So a little bit of growth there. There is still something to be desired. The fourth quarter, you look at net rating, it is not their best quarter. It's really the first and third quarters where they're, I think, fifth right now in net rating in first quarters, which is shocking to Clipper Nation, I'm sure, because of all the years with them getting off to slow starts. They're fifth in net rating in first quarters, and they're 10th in third quarters. And those are big time, minutes because you're trying to start off the half and give yourself a chance. And they were up by 11 over the Denver Nuggets early. They still went through a lull. They went through a rut offensively, and there was a 17-2 run in that second quarter. But I keep feeling like they've already played almost 50 games by how much they've been tested already this early in the season. They're gaining so much experience. They're learning so much about themselves. And we're 22, 23 games of the way in. But I just feel like I don't know if they'd score 85 or 90 points in a ball game if they didn't have James Harden, just trying to orchestrate everything. He is a system. He's proving it out there. And on a night where they hit 18 threes, I want to say he and Norman Powell hit 11 of them. And that was one of the big differentiators out there between them and the Denver Nuggets, who were efficient, but they just didn't take that many. Like those guys in the third quarter, when they went to work, when they got down by 10 and immediately battled back, Brandon, to me, that was the turning point in the ball game where it looked like there was going to be some cushion there for Denver entering the fourth quarter, and the Clippers fought back right away. And they've been doing that recently. They were down 10 multiple times against Minnesota. I know they still lost that game, but they battle back and they show a little bit more poise now when they're down.
Yeah, and I mean James Harden, by the way, has been the leading scorer in over half the ball games, and he's been the leading scorer in 6 of the last 7 games. So he's basically doing everything that he needs to for this Clippers team. And if you would have told me that they'd be 13-9 after 22 games, I would have bit your hand off and said you're nuts, because the wins that they've come up with, they've beaten Denver twice already, man, and they've beaten Golden State twice. They've beat teams that you wouldn't have expected. They beat Philadelphia already. I mean, how many times did you expect that to happen going into the season? They beat them up. They've beat them twice now. They've taken care of business, and the schedule will get easier at some point. Granted, the Western Conference is a gauntlet, so you don't get many games off. We thought Portland was a game off last time around, and we saw how that ended up. And that's the next game, obviously. But to have a game against an Eastern Conference foe will certainly help them, you would hope, at home. But man, this team just continues to defy all expectations. And James Harden's doing anything and everything he needs to do. And like you said, they're showing no quit. And that's one thing that we loved so much about those Pat Bev and Montrezl Harrell and those Clippers, is that they never gave up. I mean, case in point is that game against the Warriors, the playoff game where they came back and won. This team seriously never thinks they're out of a game. And to have that mindset is absolutely crucial. And like you said, they did it against Minnesota. And then against Denver, a team that has Jokic and has Porter and has Jamal Murray. I mean, they've got guys that are frankly should be better than you. They should be beating you. And for them to get that win, it was a really good win. And I'm stunned by what they've done so far. And there's always that magic word that looms in the background that starts with a K and ends with an I that could take this team to the next level. And you never know when that's going to occur. But they're doing everything they can to stay competitive. And that's all you can ask for as a fan, is a team that fights every night. And they're doing that.
If I told you coming into the season that if they just had Kawhi Leonard, they could still be a championship contender or one of the best teams in the West, would you believe that? Because right now, I fully believe that they could beat anyone in a 7-game series, at least in the Western Conference. I don't know about the Boston Celtics coming out of the East if that happens again, but I think with Kawhi, if he's at the level he was at last season, matching up with the rest of this roster, they got everything else I think you need in a 7-game series. I do feel like that, and I didn't expect to be there this early in the season, certainly.
I think that apart from Boston, I think you could say that they have what it takes against nearly every single team, because Denver obviously would have been one of the teams you'd be concerned about. I think the athletic teams in Oklahoma City and Houston are still going to give the Clippers a lot of trouble because of how athletic and how fast they play against a very old Clippers team in some aspects. But if you take away those couple of teams, I think the Clippers certainly can't compete with any of them. I mean, you look at last year's top teams, Dallas, Minnesota, and Denver. I think the Clippers very well could beat any of those three in a 7-game series. I'm not sure about Oklahoma City. I'm not sure about Houston. It's weird to say that about Houston. I just don't think it's a very good matchup for the Clippers. But you add in the Boston team, and I think those are the only 3 teams that really, I would say, going in, the Clippers have very little to no shot against.
Rock said Clippers entering that territory that they may try to pivot into go for it, try to win, believing Kawhi and one more could put them over. Here's what I would caution against. We have to see if Kawhi can even stay healthy first. You do not make a move if you don't believe Kawhi's health can be sustainable. There's just no way you can give up any more future assets.
Yeah. What's going for it? What does that even entail? Because it's not like the Clippers have a ton of assets that they can go and deal. It's going to be a draft pick, and the Clippers already have given up basically all of that. And I just don't think you can do that right now. The Clippers have gone all in so much in the last couple of years that I really think you just go with what you have right now. The Clippers showed that in the offseason by making sure that everyone was not tethered to long-term contracts. They didn't bring back Paul George because of that reason. They have Kawhi Leonard to basically a 2+1, I believe. You have Harden to a 1+1. These guys are not locked into long-term contracts. So you don't go and trade away a long-term pick, a draft pick that's far away, because you don't know what that pick's going to become. This is a team that is trying to rebuild while also stay competitive, and they've done a phenomenal job of somehow staying on that line, which is very hard to do.
The one guy that I thought could be dangled out there, and I didn't think I'd be saying this coming into this year, is Terrence Mann. And I
Yeah.
love Terrence Mann, but he's also now coming off his best game of the season easily, where Amir Coffey goes out with that knee injury. Apparently he's fine. He just banged knees, and Coach Lou was riding the hot hand. Terrence Mann had some of the biggest plays of the ball game. The biggest one probably being that offensive rebound where James Harden found him in the far side corner for that three-pointer. But the mid-range shot to end the third quarter, another midi in the fourth quarter, another 3 in the fourth quarter outside the one I just mentioned. He was looking as much as like himself that we have seen. I don't know. This was just this is the Terrence Mann of old. This is what we've been asking for. And people are talking about how he's looked much better coming off the bench. It's still been a little bit up and down. It hasn't been consistently Terrence Mann. Oh, he's coming off the bench now. He's found his groove. That hasn't been the case. There's been a wide variance in play from him. But I do wonder, only because they have so many guys that can do what he does to some degree. There's some overlap in the skill set there, Brandon. If they did make a move, would Terrence Mann be the guy that could be on the way out?
Yeah, I mean, Mann's that guy because you can all of a sudden have a guy like Amir Coffey step into his shoes and basically do a lot of what he has done. I remember we a couple of years ago, I had Justin Wilson of LA Clippers film on my show, and when Amir Coffey was at his peak, he said Amir's better than Terrence. I mean, we got to that point where he even uttered those words. And granted, I don't know if he would still believe the same now. He may,
I
but
mean, he was just starting over Terrence. He got in the starting lineup when Powell was out.
right, exactly. I mean, Amir basically does a lot of what Terrence does. And so certainly those two overlap. And it's funny you bring that up with Terrence because Matt and I were just talking about this. I think it was either last show or the show before that, where I said basically his value is as the lowest it's going to be. I mean, you had a chance to trade him the last couple of years and make him as part of a package that really would have fetched you something nice. And I even mentioned that if you would have included him in the Philadelphia deal, you would have been able to keep a pick or two. And instead, you end up giving up the picks and you have Terrence Mann. But the question is, who would want him at this low value? Games like this certainly show you what you have in Terrence Mann. The issue has been consistency. I mean, like you said, it's just has been far and few between with games like this. Sure, yesterday, 15 points on 6 of 7 shooting is great. But the game against Minnesota, he had 2 points on 1 of 5 shooting, 0 for 2 from 3. Game before that against Washington, 6 points on 2 of 6 shooting, 0 for 1 from 3. There's just been so much inconsistency with Terrence Mann. If he was this player night to night that he showed yesterday, he's a huge part of what they do, but he just has not been able to do that.
No, and we're seeing glimpses and flashes of who he has been in the past, but that consistency is what everybody's looking for. And I just don't know what happens if this team does, if they should get to a place where they're fully healthy and there's going to be a major minutes crunch and everybody wants to see Jordan Miller out there. And is Coach Lou going to keep going with KPJ out there because he's still been up and down? And I think, at this point, I've seen enough to say I'd rather just see Jordan Miller get more run. And if that takes minutes away from KPJ, and I know they can't duplicate each other's skills because KPJ can't handle the rock a little bit more and create for himself. But I just watched Jordan Miller go at Aaron Gordon multiple times for a layup last night. Like that was impressive. And then Coach Lou came out post game and said he does have his trust, but he also mentioned how it's going to depend on who's available and minutes. So it's not like this is it. He's getting 15 minutes a night from here on out, Jordan Miller. That's not the case. So I just wonder if you have to do a consolidation trade at some point, and not even talking about Bones Highland and PJ Tucker, two guys who are obviously on the outs. I mean, if Bones Highland can't get into a game last night where they didn't have KPJ, then it's pretty much over for him. The writing is on the wall. He is just not trusted by this coaching staff, and he's been in the doghouse for some time. It's been pretty obvious. I don't know. Terrence Mann is an asset still. I still think, even though we watch every game so closely and we know how he should look, teams on the outside might be like, whatever, I can get him back to where he was, or it's only, 20 games into this season. And maybe they even know that he's got off to these slow starts before and then turns it around. Like, I think his value is decent right now, even though he hasn't played his best, because the contract is still tradable. I don't think that is a contract that limits the Clippers so much with him.
No, and it's certainly a possible trade ship. It's just what would you get back in return and what do you need in return? Because again, we can always talk about trades, and you and I talk about this all the time. When everyone says, all right, we need to make a trade, it's like, okay, but who's taking him and what are you getting back in return? And you mentioned Bones Highland. And listen, I'm actually surprised that happened yesterday because the Clippers have not been willing to play young guys unless they've actually needed to in the last couple of years. They very easily could have just put Jordan Miller back on the bench and put Bones Highland into that role of KPJ and send Jordan Miller back to the bench. And they didn't do that. They kept him in the rotation. So good on the Clippers doing that. And I think that does spell the end for sure of Bones Highland. And I think the writing has been on the wall really for several weeks that he's not a part of this team's plans. But I could see a team possibly trying to bite and grab him. and you can do it. I mean, I'd be curious to see what he would fetch back, no matter what. Even if you're trying to go for it, if you weren't going for it, I would still float Terrence Mann out there because, like I said, you have Amir Coffee there, and you just signed him to a contract. So why not see what you can get for Terrence Mann? And Rock brings up a point in the chat right now to see what you could possibly get for Harden or Powell. And listen, again, it goes back to what I was saying. For this team, the future is what's important. They're trying to stay competitive. And the talk before the season was that a guy like Norm Powell could certainly be a trade chip. And you have to figure out where you are as a team. If all of a sudden Kawhi Leonard is going to be ruled out for the season, and listen, that could happen at any point, then I think you seriously can consider that. You can consider trading Harden. You can consider trading Norm. Would it suck as a fan because this team has been really fun to root for and we think that they can win any game? Absolutely. But if you're not going to get Kawhi back, you're not winning a title with the way this team is constructed. So like if you could get a massive haul for one of those guys, I would get it. If you're not going to get a massive haul in return, you ride it out and see what happens.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that, especially because it looks like the Houston Rockets are playing so well that chasing them down and having OKC swap picks with them instead of the Clippers just feels really unlikely. Houston's got the second best record right now in the Western Conference. They are 15-6. The Clippers are in the seventh spot at 13-9. OKC is coming for their pick right now. So if you know Kawhi's not coming back, or if he had a setback or something like that, or God forbid he has to have another surgery, and you just see that, okay, we're capped. All the talk that we had earlier about if you get Kawhi back, 7-game series, I like their chances against anybody. If Kawhi's not available, then you got to go a different direction. Then you should probably have a sell-off because that means you're opening up minutes for young guys who need to play more and turn it into more of a development bridge year because you're not even going to have your pick anyways. You're going to have the 29th or 30th pick probably, whatever OKC ends up at, their first round pick. So I think there is some confusion there, by the way. Some people just think they're losing their pick altogether. They're just getting OKC's pick, which is going to be at the very end of the first round.
Drives me absolutely nuts, by the way. When people say that the Clippers have no picks for the next 6 or 7 years, Bill Simmons does it all the goddamn time. I want to say to them, that's not how this works. Okay. When you're switching picks with somebody, you still have a pick in the first round every other year. So knock it off.
They won't let teams trade consecutive picks now because they're trying to save them from themselves after some of the dumbass trades we've seen over the last 15, 20 years. They're trying to make sure front offices don't hang themselves like that. Speaking of things that might upset you, what did you think of the performance by Russell Westbrook last night?
Russ. Oh, man. Listen, Russ is a guy that is just going to do his thing. And I remember the first game when the Clippers played against the Nuggets, and he was just trying so damn hard to basically impress and do whatever he could to just kind of get back at the Clippers. And he was turning the basketball over. He was missing shots. And then all of a sudden you look at yesterday, 2 of 11, and here's another guy that once again, he's trying very hard to try and impress. It's just one of those things where the Clippers were trying to make something when they had him that was never going to really work. And credit, by the way, to Shane Young, who really was anti-Westbrook from the start. And some of us were like, listen, he can be that guy. He can turn it around. Denver has said for ages, you just got to let Russ cook. He can do it. Just put him in his spot. And, I mean, listen, he's Russ. Hope he succeeds, but at the same time, he just doesn't make sense to the Clippers. I'm glad he left and they're able to move on and give minutes to guys like Jordan Miller. Because by the way, Jordan Miller never gets those minutes if Russell Westbrook is on the team because he gets those minutes instead.
Yeah, completely. And they basically swapped him out for Chris Dunn. Chris Dunn is another guy, and Derek Jones Jr., that do a lot of the stuff that Terrence Mann does. Those are 2 more guys outside of Amir Coffee. There's just a lot of crossover there. So,
and by the way, if one of those guys gets hurt, Chris Dunn or Derek Jones Jr., your team starts losing games. I mean, this team is so locked in on the defensive end, and that's seriously their identity, that it's not even as much. I mean, look, Norm Powell was out, and they still won ball games. It's not about the offense, man. It's about the defense. And if you lose some of those defensive cogs, you're cooked.
4th best defense in the NBA. They have backed up all the talk this offseason. It finally has translated and carried over from training camp, and they've been able to sustain it. And Jeff Van Gundy is a revelation. What he is getting out of this team defensively. And I'm not taking away credit from Coach Lou, and he's been awesome so far this season too. But that defensive coordinator and a rah-rah guy like that showing that level of emotion, I think it gets guys to buy in nightly
Mhm.
because you can lose players over time. There's slippage typically as the season goes along if things aren't going your way. And we've rarely seen their poor offense affect their defense. That is incredible to me. That is a testament to Jeff Van Gundy and the coaching staff.
Yeah, and I've said this on several different shows that we've had on Talking Ship that they're all on one string. I mean, they really are going as one, and they define the "we are one team." I mean, it doesn't matter where they are on the court; they are in the right spot, and they make sure that they're getting their hands on passes. Chris Dunn has been unbelievable in defensive end. I saw you cook someone, by the way, on social media for trying
What'd I
to get
say?
didn't someone comment that was one of the worst Chris Dunn games of the season, or whatever, and someone was hating on Chris Dunn, and you basically
Oh,
that?
people were saying trade him after those turnovers against Minnesota. One
Yeah,
of them where he got to a rebound that he probably never should have been able to get to, and he just slipped on the floor.
yeah, bro. I mean, come on. What he's done for this team, no pun intended, has been just remarkable. And the Clippers, and we talked about this in the offseason, and you posted a couple of times today with what Lawrence Frank has done. And to go ahead and bring in guys that have basically formed the identity of this team in Chris Dunn and Derek Jones Jr. as the two most defensive minded players that can also contribute on the offensive end, and for Chris Dunn to take some of that load off of James Harden now in the offensive to take ball handling, and then to pair him with Zoo, who you knew was going to be a key cog. I mean, they've done all the right things. Not keeping Paul George was brilliant. Getting Chris Dunn was brilliant. Getting Derek Jones Jr. was brilliant, even though I thought that was a major buy high type of move, one that I feel like the Angels would do, where they see a guy on there that they see a guy in a playoff series, and all of a sudden they go and get that dude. It's like, it reminds me of what it was Tyler Anderson, I think, that just had the season of his life with the Dodgers, and they went and got him from the Dodgers, and he was terrible with the Angels. It's like you see Derek Jones Jr. in the playoffs against you and what he does, and you go and get him, but he has really been as advertised in what they've needed to do. So Lawrence Frank has been unbelievable as well.
Last thing here, you mentioned it earlier. I don't know if Caleb remembers this part because he says Clippers win the NBA Cup game tomorrow easily over the Blazers, even though they gave the Mavs a run yesterday. Guys, the Blazers beat the Clippers at Intuit Dome already this season. You can't overlook anyone. That is
Yeah.
a big game. They got to get it because the very next night they're taking on Minnesota again.
Yeah. By the way, we can keep going on this one. If you're good with me posting this on the Talking Ship side, we're good with just continuing to go on this if you want to, because I'm recording this on my end, so I'm happy to keep going if you want to. But
It's up to you. I wanted to give you the exclusive with talking ship stuff.
yeah,
It's your call, Brandon.
I'm good if we wanted to keep going. We can just post
Okay.
this as a simulcast of sorts.
All right. Do you want to
So
take this question from Ray?
yeah, sure. Hooray. Holy ship, it's Brandon Marcus. You mentioned a recent Talking Ship podcast. They've traveled through holidays. Yes, I have. I have been a broadcaster for college basketball since I graduated college. So it's been over a decade of traveling with teams, and I did so recently with UC Irvine as their women's play-by-play broadcaster. And so I was traveling with them, and I got a chance to go to pretty much every single road game. And not only that, but I also got to go to the NCAA tournament this past year when they played against Gonzaga. So I did that, which was great. Did a bunch of the conference tournaments. So I was staying in the hotels, I was flying with them, and I got to fly private and charter when they went to the NCAA tournament. So that was really cool as well. So that answers your question.
There you go, Ray. Keep them coming. We got Brandon Marcus on from Talking Ship as I'm trying to fill in for Matt Mattawarren. Not easy. How the heck are you, Clipper Nation? Somebody saying the Blazers got lucky. Guys, come
No.
on. Can we not do this? They're an NBA team too. They have talent there as well. And the Clippers play a lot of close games, so it leaves you susceptible for a team sneaking up and biting at your heels. The distance between the Clippers and anybody they play for the most part outside of Washington, it's not that wide of a margin of error that they have to work with right now because offensively, I think I looked it up earlier, they're still 23rd. They're right now until they get Kawhi back, they're still probably going to be a bottom 10 offense. I still think if they didn't have James Harden, they'd probably be the worst offense in the league, but This is not their strength, and it keeps teams in games. What I always say is their defense keeps them in games. Their offense keeps the opposition in games. That's typically what's happened so far this season, where they played so many close games out there. You mentioned Derrick Jones Jr. I think one of the reasons, one of the maybe because I was fearful as well that they bought high because his 3-point shooting in the playoffs, where he shot 38% from three, was not representative of anything he had done in the regular season before, and it's a
Mhm.
lower sample size or smaller sample size, but it looks like he's a grinder guy too that has been waiting for a bigger opportunity. That just can't help himself, a gym rat type that wants to work, do the hard work, and prove that he's more because he's been on NBA minimum contracts forever. He's bounced around the league for a while, and he has shown off a lot of bounce while doing so. But it's like they have brought together all these guys. I don't want to say island of misfit toys or whatever, but a lot of guys with a chip on their shoulder, and it has strengthened the resolve in this locker room and just the camaraderie with a bunch of guys wanting a bigger opportunity. Oh, Paul George is out. Kawhi's hurt. This is our time, and they're all taking advantage of it, Brandon.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is that there's always these types of dudes that have all the potential. And I come obviously from a fantasy basketball background over when in my old spot with Dan, and then now over at the Talking Shit podcast on the Old Man Squad podcast network. And we always talk about dudes that have all the abilities to contribute all over the place, whether it be points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks. And Derrick Jones Jr. was always one of those dudes that really could contribute and give you the defensive stuff and also the offensive stuff. I remember when he was on Miami, and there was always these high expectations of what he could be. And then he goes to Dallas, and then now obviously he's with the Clippers. There's another one of those guys that really has high expectations. Guy like Chris Boucher over in Toronto that just never really gets the major run, but given the run, could be a dude that just puts up a ton of numbers. But Derrick Jones is a guy that fits what the Clippers need. I mean, how often during the Lob City Clip era did the Clippers need that three that could then spread the floor but also play good defense? I mean, they tried everything and anything that included guys like Paul Pierce, and they tried to do whatever they could to try and get that small forward. And they tried Matt Barnes, they tried Paul Pierce. I mean, there was a ton of dudes that they threw in there, Wesley Johnson.
Hmm.
And then here we are with the Clippers finding a guy in Derrick Jones Jr. that can shoot the three ball. He's athletic. He does on the defensive end. And it's tough to find dudes like that. But when you get the opportunity, and Derrick Jones Jr. is not a good dude that started very much at all in his career, he's getting it and he's succeeding because he's surrounded by the right people. And most importantly, and I don't think this is mentioned very often, Adam, he's surrounded by the right coaches, because you can have a player with all the potential in the world, and you see that in any sport. But if they don't have the right coaching around them, then they might fail. I mean, you see that in the NFL when a guy like CJ Stroud versus Bryce Young. I mean, CJ Stroud gets the right coaching. Bryce Young certainly does not in
Hmm.
his first year. And now here we are where it's Derrick Jones Jr. is getting the opportunity. He's being coached by Jeff Van Gundy, and he's thriving.
Rock brings up something interesting I'd love to touch upon with you. He said, still don't think the team should give up on KPJ. I know he's polarizing for many reasons, but we saw in the game we need as many shot creators as possible. I'm just getting to the point where the idea of KPJ, I understand. I understand why he's been given this opportunity, but we're over 25% of the way into the season now, and I just don't know if the basketball IQ is ever going to be in a place that's good enough for him to make a positive impact consistently on this team. And that's what worries me, Brandon. Even though I like the thought, it makes sense in a lot of ways. They do need some of what he brings, but he doesn't bring it consistently enough to me where I'd rather go in a different direction at this point.
Get what you're saying. At the same time, I think he's a guy that very well could be one of those dudes that sits on your bench for now. And then if you are out of it at the end of the season, he's a guy that gets more minutes. You can kind of see what he can do.
Oh, for
But
sure. In that situation, I'm all for it. Yeah.
exactly. But as someone that's going to play over a guy like Chris Dunn, that would never happen. Is he going to play over a guy like Jordan Miller? It depends on the situation. But what Jordan Miller has shown, and hell, man, he was showing it during Summer League. And I think that was the biggest question is he going to be able to translate this to actual NBA games? Is he going to be able to get to the free throw line at will? Is he going to be as aggressive getting to the hoop And he's shown that he certainly has the ability to do that. And I don't know what the age difference is between Jordan Miller and Kevin Porter Jr. But
I I think KPJ is actually younger than Jordan
yeah,
Miller.
so it's one of those things where they're both young dudes, so you can't quite give up on a guy like Kevin Porter Jr. You can sit on your bench, and I get, yes, he's very much polarizing for many reasons. And could he be that dude that you want him to be? Maybe down the line with the right coaching, like I said before. But yeah, right now with the way this team is going, do you need him? No, I don't think you need him. But is he someone that could come in the ball game when you want that type of stuff? Sure.
I just feel like he's one of Coach Lou's favorites because he has gotten a very long leash early on, and the
Yeah.
play has been spotty at best. And there are times where it looks really bad out there. He had the play when they were on the road last where he threw the ball into the stands, I think in Boston, to a fan. I don't know what he was looking at. And he goes into ISO tunnel vision ball. And when he misses those shots, when they don't go, it just looks miserable out there as everyone else is just watching him dance with the basketball. And guys have even called him out, not in a negative way, but they've just said, look, you make that first or second move, you typically already have the defender off balance. You don't have to keep dancing and snatching it back. You already have the advantage, so take it. But sometimes young guys with a handle like that, they just love to do a lot of dancing out there. And if he's playing, Jordan Miller is going to get less minutes. And that's what's been happening so far. So I'm just such a big Jordan Miller fan. And I feel like he plays more of a winning brand of basketball and isn't making a lot of mistakes out there. Coach Lou talked about it post game saying, as long as, he's solid defensively, basically, we're preaching that part of it. And I think he has been. He trusts him in what he can bring on the offensive end. Again, he's bodying real NBA players and one of the better defenders out there in Aaron Gordon last night multiple times. And they looked like shocked. Like, what is happening? How is this guy making these crazy floaters and going to his left like this on us? Jordan Miller has a special and high efficiency skill set that I just don't know if KPJ will ever get to having because he has more of a bag, you can say, and more of an array of shots he can go to. But is he knocking them down frequently enough to justify his play out there? I don't know. I know he is very polarizing in Clipper Nation. I just feel like I know he has the ankle injury right now and he'll be out tomorrow. I'm hoping Jordan Miller makes such a great impression that they can't take him out of the lineup at this point, that there's no way they can not give him minutes consistently now.
Yeah, and by the way, he's 24 years old, so it's not like he's the youngest pup. I mean, it's again, it reminds me of Terrence Mann, where we kept thinking he was so young, but the Clippers didn't get these guys when they're 20 years old. So you look at a guy like Jordan Miller, he's not young, he's 24 years old. You would hope he'd be able to contribute at this level right now because you have a lot of guys who are younger that are contributing. I mean, hell, I think Anthony Edwards is younger than Jordan Miller. But yes, I think with him, you want to have that level of aggression. And like you said, the lack of turnovers. He's only turned it over more than 2 times, I think once. And he had one turnover yesterday. He's a guy that really takes care of the basketball while also being a guy that can stretch the floor. And with Porter Jr., I mean, he put up some crazy numbers in Houston. I didn't watch his games in Houston, but you just look at the box scores and he's putting up basically triple double type numbers. That's not what we're seeing on this
No.
Clippers team. And I don't know why that is.
Well,
But
that
this is
Houston team was awful, by the way. They were
incredible.
as dysfunctional of a franchise at that time as anyone has been in the modern NBA. It was a brutal watch, and he had a much longer leash there. But there were some efficiency things going in his favor. Like on catch and shoot threes, he was at 48% his second to last year in Houston and 44% his last year in Houston. But he's not taking any catch and shoot threes with the Clippers at all. And he can't hit off the bounce. And it looks like, and he even said this to Tom Marizarli, he has changed his shot some. And look, I wanted Kevin Porter Jr. to work. I said at one point I felt like he could end up in the starting lineup, which was a pretty hot take and is looking pretty bad right now. But I just don't know when you have a guy like Jordan Miller, if you can continue to give minutes to a guy with this poor of a shot selection that is that erratic out there. There's some Russell Westbrook type of stuff with Kevin Porter Jr. that I'm not a fan of.
That's a really, really interesting comparison because in the weaknesses, and that is 3-point shooting, where he's shooting 18%, free throw shooting, where he's shooting 63%, turnovers, he's averaging over 2 per ball game, all stuff that we hated with Russell Westbrook. And he is certainly showing some of that. So it's a really, really good comparison and not one that I heard. because he does the negative things that you don't want to see from a player on the floor. And he's not contributing enough of the positive things for those positive things to matter.
I know some people love the fact, and he's had some really good moments. He's had some good games where he has helped this team in fourth quarters. He had a 14 or 12-point fourth quarter. I think that was the second game against Sacramento. I'm not saying he hasn't shown anything or it's all been bad. I'm saying it's been mixed. It's been a mixed bag at best right now for Kevin Porter Jr., and a lot of the bad habits still remain. I don't know if he's gotten or has progressed far enough so far, even though he's better than he was the first 5 games, to justify keep to continue to run him out there when somebody like Jordan Miller just is efficient and doesn't make that many mistakes. He's not a negative. Like, more guys like that lead to winning. That tends to be how things work in this league. And he's 6 months older than Kevin Porter Jr., basically. Jordan
Yeah.
Miller. He's going to be 25 in January. So what are we waiting for? If you think you got something in him, and this was a second round steal, and so far, as you mentioned, everything he was doing in Summer League, G League, and preseason translates to the NBA level, then that guy has to play, because not only can he help you win games right now, he can do it while developing and getting better. That is a rare thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things where if you think you have someone that can be a part of your foundation going forward, then go ahead and play them and let's see how they do. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do going forward, because I've been very vocal in this that I think the Clippers have done a very poor job with the youth over the last decade or so. I mean, the last one that really has hit, that has been a major part of the rotation and been a key cog in what they have done. Am I wrong in saying that DeAndre Jordan is probably the last time the Clippers have drafted somebody that has been a main part of their starting lineup and someone that you could rely on night to night? Think about
I
that.
mean, starting lineup. Yeah, I mean, they only had Shea for a year.
Yeah, that does not count.
I, Terrence Mann has started a lot for this team. You could make
Yeah.
that argument.
Mhm.
Amir Coffey has started and has filled in when guys have been hurt, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
So I'm not like, I almost give them credit. It almost feels like they drafted Ivica Zubac because they got him so early on from the Lakers, and the Lakers apparently didn't know what they had, or at least Magic Johnson didn't for whatever reason. But yeah, you're not wrong there. I always say this though. They were in win now mode. It's so hard to develop guys while you're trying to win a championship, and that
No
put them in
doubt.
a really tough spot. Now, there is not an excuse for that currently. Until Kawhi comes back and looks like Kawhi, and it looks like they can be a top 4 team in the West, I'm very hopeful when it comes to Kawhi Leonard, and I want to be as positive as possible, but I also have to be realistic and be like, even if he comes back, we're going to see if that knee continues to swell up or not when he plays real NBA basketball, because that's pretty much what keeps happening. That's what it seems to be right now. And Coach Lou was asked pregame by Tomer Azarli yesterday. I thought this was very revealing regarding Kawhi.
Hmm.
Tomer asked him about how, did you expect to be this far into the season without Kawhi Leonard? And he said no. So you can say there hasn't been a setback, but clearly he has not progressed as fast as they thought he would have by now.
Yep. I saw that as well, and it's spot on. And there hasn't been information that's come out on him. One day we'll find out what actually has happened and what's going on behind the scenes, because it's gone to the point now where I'm not sure it's managing. I mean, something had to have happened, and I don't know where we are that this is taking so long to recover from. And listen, Mo Bamba talked about it, how he had some stuff with his knee, and the Clippers were able to identify what it was, and they were able to manage it. And here he is, he's contributing, and he's been really important off the bench. And frankly, he's going to play a big role tomorrow against Portland, because Portland is without 2 of their 3 centers. I mean, Robert Williams has a concussion. He's going to be out. Klingon's going to be out for at least a month, and he's going to be out probably more than that. So all they have is DeAndre Ayton, who is going to face up against Zoo, who I think is a really good matchup for Zoo on both sides of the floor. But man, it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward, and if we ever see Kawhi, because his knees might just be completely cooked. And Matt and I are basically at the point now where we stop talking about him on the show, but it's hard to not talk about him because you see what this team's doing without him at 13-9 and what they could be with him. But I thought that was really interesting that he said that, and I don't know if he was saying that just to say it, or if he actually truly did not think that he was going to be out this long, and that he was thinking this is just going to be a couple of weeks and that we'd see him maybe after a month. But the fact this continues to go longer and longer and longer, I do wonder when we will see him. And I'm not no doctor, but I got to assume that if he's shooting, which I think he is, right? You've been at practices. If he's shooting,
Oh,
maybe that means that we could see him in like a month or so. But putting a timeline on Kawhi is useless.
basically, he has done some shooting and some on-court activities recently. But it's
Yeah.
like
What does
shooting,
that
he
mean?
doesn't have a shoulder injury. I assume he can shoot the basketball. And apparently this summer, he was doing the hard stuff. He said at media day this summer at one point, he was doing his usual training routine. And then Coach Lou admitted that there was a setback earlier this season, right after Team USA. So it's very vague. It's Kawhi Leonard. How are we ever going to know? Maybe we'll find out in his post-playing career.
And
I don't
listen,
know.
the reporting on it has been really inconsistent. I mean, listen, Law does an unbelievable job with The Athletic, and he was adamant that there was no setback. And then all of a sudden, a week later, we found out there was indeed a setback, that something did happen, and there was surgery, and something happened. So even the information that he's being fed is not correct, and it's tough
Well,
for these beat reporters.
and Law had him initially, he thought first, second week of November. Then he thought sometime actually this week when they have the time off, they have 3 days off, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, could be uh, another landing point for Kawhi Leonard getting back or at least practicing. Now he's moved that back too. So I think everyone had the expectation that he would be back relatively soon. And Law said that regarding to all his sources and people he talked to. That was right before the season started. I had him on and I kind of pressed him on it. I was like, what does relatively soon mean? By the end of this year? And Law gave me a look like I was being a smartass or sarcastic. I was dead serious. I understand why he interpreted it that way, but there's a chance he's not back before the end of this year, which is why I asked the question. We're talking relatively soon at the start of the season, and Kawhi is still nowhere to be found. And I get it. It is a tricky situation. They have to have him do activities and see if the knee swells up, and hopefully it doesn't. And then he gets to check that box and say, okay, move on to the next activity. I'm guessing that's how this is going right now. But maybe the fact that the Clippers are 13-9 gives him a longer runway and has bought him more time to get healthy. That could be a part of this as well. And yeah, guys, I've played the Pat Bev sound. We've
And
all heard the Pat Bev sound.
I was going to comment on that. I was like, dude, you don't know what the hell he's talking about in that conversation. That does not, a player saying that he is going to come back does not mean anything. I mean, he was not going to say to Pat Bev, yeah, dude, my knee sucks, dude. I'm done. I'm done. I'm just sitting there. These fools don't know anything. Shams is stupid, dude. No, they're not going to say anything otherwise. Don't believe anything a player says about his own injury. That's one thing that I've learned throughout the last many years. Never believe a player about their own injury.
I'll play it one more time just to cover my bases here. Guys, I don't know if you're a big listener to the show, but it has been played here. I put it up on Twitter.
They're gonna be scary in the playoffs. I talked to Kawhi on the phone yesterday. He's healing up. He's healing up like a fucking machine. Claw. That's why I got him in my phone. Claw. The league stinks right now. Views are low. I agree. They are waiting on the claw. I say, tell my boy Germ, I say, lock the fuck in. He said, I'm gonna get right, I'm on the way. Silent assassin. That's my dog.
I hope he takes his time coming back. As much as
So there was Pat Bev on Kawhi. You know when I felt much better about that sound? Before I heard Patrick Beverly say this, and this was about Russell Westbrook yesterday, which absolutely makes no sense and is completely not based in anything factual.
One thing about Russ that people have to understand, Russ is about a 7 during regular season. When Russ gets to the playoffs, y'all go see a whole different side of Russ. He's played so many games, man. He is a big-time, lights-on basketball player. So all his damage is going to be done in the playoffs. I can't wait to see Russ in the playoffs with that team. Russ shoots 41, 42% in the playoffs from 3. Denver, you watch out for Denver, man. Watch out for Denver.
That is objectively false. There is no world where Russell Westbrook is better or more efficient in the playoffs. He is a playoffs lowerer, not a riser. He shoots 40%, barely 40% from the field and 29% from three in the playoffs, and just went 8 for 42 in his last 5 playoff games with the Clippers just this past season. He does not elevate his game at all.
Yeah, bro, I don't know what Pat Bev is talking about there. I mean, you look at what he has done with the Clippers, and listen, no, he is not going to be that dude in the postseason. And it's one of those things where the NBA community, like those players, they all love Russ for some reason, and they all think that he's going to be this massive game changer. And I don't know
Because
what
he
he is.
snarls
Yeah,
and he
I don't know
plays
what it
hard.
is. Yeah, no, it's not that. It's one of those things where the play on the court actually matters, and forget what these guys are talking about. So yes, I believe nothing about Kawhi Leonard in that conversation. They're texting each other. What's he going to do? You think he's actually going to go and say anything else if that conversation happened to lead to, hey, my knee's bugging me? Kawhi's not going to tell anybody that, especially a guy with his own damn podcast. You think Kawhi Leonard's going to let anything out about his injury out to a fellow player that doesn't shut his trap? No, that's not happening. Kawhi's calculated. He knows what he's talking about. He wouldn't say anything else to a guy like Pat Bev.
I love Pat Bev. I wanted to believe there was something to that Kawhi Leonard news, but I can't disagree with much of what Brandon Marcus is saying here. Jonathan Ing said, I'd say the longer Kawhi is out, there is more cause for worry, and we as fans are right for worrying, even as the team is doing well right now, especially given his contract. Of course, I've been worried since late March, since April, since we first found out about this. A guy's knee swelling from playing basketball, but there's no structural damage. Like, why is it swelling then? And then he ended up having surgery.
Yeah, and it's not getting better. And yeah, I it's interesting. I want to push back on something you said earlier, what somebody said earlier, where they mentioned that if he, or maybe I think it was you that said it. I wasn't sure if it was a comment or if you said it. That if the Clippers were losing, maybe there'd be more impetus for Kawhi to come back sooner, and that because they're winning right now, that maybe that gives him more leeway to get better. I think it's the opposite, because if they were losing, there'd be no reason whatsoever to bring him back, because you're basically going to be fighting for what, a 7 or an 8 seed at that point with him coming back. But with him now doing better, I don't know, man. I think that it's one of those things where I don't think he's coming back if you're losing ball games. I think he's more likely to come back if you're winning. I just don't know when we're going to see him, but it's
Yeah. I guess it meant like a game under 500 or at 500 instead of 4 games over 500. But you're right. They're not going to rush him in any case.
no.
And if they were out of the picture, then maybe he wouldn't come back at all.
They're not coming back. He's not coming back till he's 100% healthy. There's at this point, I'm convinced that there is zero chance that he comes back unless he is 100% healthy. And I don't know if that's going to happen. But I mean, the questions that you guys asked in the press conference to Ty Lewis, is he going to be back this year? And he said, yeah, he'll be back this year. But what does that mean? Does that mean he's going to be back in February? Does that mean he's going to be back in March? Like, what does that mean? Because I could very well see the Clippers out of playoff contention at some point in March, and Ty Lue's like, yeah, we're actually going to shut him down. Like, he could have come back maybe now, but we're going to shut him down. He said, yeah, I told you that, guys, that he could come back at some point this year, but now the situation doesn't warrant it.
I just know that even when he comes back that first game, and I do expect it to happen, that doesn't mean he's able to stay back. The knee could swell back up after he plays real NBA basketball. My thought has always been, well, if the swelling's only gone down because he hasn't done the explosive movements, what the hell does that mean? That's not the same thing as actually playing NBA basketball.
Listen, maybe that they found something with Mo Bamba that maybe, because I think that was swelling too with Bamba.
Yeah.
And so maybe, just maybe,
he didn't do his ACL or meniscus, and
he hasn't destroyed his knees for his entire lifetime now, what it feels like.
How do you feel about Mo Bamba? Because apparently Absint's a big fan. He said the Clippers are 7-1 with Bamba. I'm a fan. All I wanted was a guy who was more serviceable than Mason Plumlee, and I think he's that.
Well, listen, I thought everybody was all over Kai Jones earlier in the season. I thought this was Kai Jones's year. And so much for that when he actually got some major playing time. And everybody, by the way, was over Moussa Diabate after he had a couple good games with Charlotte. Now all of a sudden, he has started to disappear a little bit. He had a couple of games with like 18 rebounds, and all of a sudden everyone's all over him. Now he's come back with 2 points, 9 rebounds, and a 1 block shot. And Mark Williams and Nick Richards are back, and all of a sudden you're going to see him now not playing. So listen, guys have good games. Brandon Boston Jr., by the way, had a couple of really good weeks, and now he is starting to come back to earth. So everyone's got to relax, okay? Just because a player has a good couple of weeks, your eye does not deceive you from watching someone for an entire season. Good for Brandon Boston Jr. He's been a decent part of what the Pelicans have done, but he is not all of a sudden going to be this 28-8 guy the Clippers let up. Like, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah. So, do you like Mo Bamba?
Yeah, I can mess with Bamba. Listen, I think that he's going to be an important part of what the Clippers do tomorrow. I mentioned, I think with Portland not having a backup center, I think it's going to be important to what they do, because if you look at the first meeting, they had Klingon and they had DeAndre Ayton. I don't think Robert Williams was back yet. He wasn't.
No.
But you look at that first meeting, and you had Scoot Henderson, who was there, who may or may not play in the game tomorrow. You look at Abdia started that game. He's now coming off the bench. So we'll see. It's going to be a different game than what the Clippers had with the Portland first time around, because Shaedon Sharpe is back as well. It's going to be a totally different game. But again, we've said on this show, and I said on my show that, okay, Portland will be a win, then you move on to the next game. Like you said, every single game is going to be a dogfight because of what I said earlier. The Clippers' half-court offense just isn't good enough. And that's why I say this team, as constructed, doesn't have a shot, because their half-court offense is so freaking bad that if they go into the playoffs, they're totally screwed. If you slow them down and you make them figure out their half-court offense, you see what happens when late in the game, James Harden is just ISOing and trying to figure out what he's going to do. But you bring back Kawhi, that certainly helps him a bunch.
I think Kawhi does cure pretty much everything that ails them offensively.
Yeah.
And I do think they would go from bottom 10 to a top 10 offense just like that if Kawhi is right.
Yeah.
But you're right about James Harden late in games. I just looked this up again. I had the stat before last night's game, but his assist to turnover ratio in fourth quarters this season, it's 28-20. It's closer to 1-to-1 than 2-to-1. His assist to turnover ratio in fourth quarters. Now, do we expect it to get better even if Kawhi Leonard doesn't come back for some time? Yeah, because it looks like, I got to say this, his burst looked phenomenal last night. Like, it looked as close as Brooklyn Nets James Harden before the hamstring injury as I had seen. This was as explosive as he has looked in a Clippers uniform for sure. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's got me thinking some crazy stuff. Like, is James Harden, he talked about his season legs kicking in. I was skeptical about that. I was thinking it's more just about the fact that he has so much on his plate. But what happens to them offensively and what happens to their record if James Harden is just more efficient all of a sudden? Because his efficiency was so low and they're still winning games. So what happens if that goes up? Like, honestly.
Yeah, but then you can also say what happens if all of a sudden Norm Powell starts coming back down to earth and you have a guy like, if James Harden stays at where he is. I mean, listen, you're right though. I mean, they're right now where the Clippers are, there is certainly a higher ceiling that they can get to. There's also a lower floor that they can get to. And you got to remember, I mean, we just hit December, Adam. James Harden's got a ton of minutes on his legs. That man ain't young. The further and further we get into the season, you're asking a guy to possibly get hurt with how many minutes you're playing him. And you're begging for a soft tissue injury with how much you're having to play him and ride him. So you got to be really careful that you don't try and go after it in one game and compromise your entire season.
It's your eyes, Gonzo. It's your eyes. Norm Powell's not smoking layups left and right. I know he missed one last night going to his right, but
he's still shooting Russell Westbrook. That's Russell Westbrook you're seeing blowing a lot of layups.
And he did. I think he started 0-5, and he missed like 3 wide open threes and 2 smoked layups. It's just being on the other side of the Russell Westbrook experience is where I like to be.
Can you imagine what Jeff Van Gundy would do with a guy like Russell Westbrook that would absolutely murder your defense because every single time he misses a layup, all of a sudden it's a fast break for the other team?
I think that's something else that's going on in this locker room. You have 2 huge egos out with Russ and Paul George.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a big difference because guys can talk to one another. They can level with one another. coaches don't have to walk on eggshells around some of these massive egos. I think that's a huge thing for this team right now. And obviously, it's not like the Denver Nuggets are playing great basketball at the moment. I know they have high hopes for Russ and him playing with more pace and tempo, and that's going to fix them, but it's not working yet.
How about those Philadelphia 76ers? How's that team doing with their super trio of Paul George, Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey that is having a certain leaker come out and talk about the meeting with Paul George and with Maxey and Embiid and what was said there. I mean, listen, that happens with dysfunctional teams that have way too many egos in a locker room and that people just don't want to stay quiet. You're not going to see that with this Clippers team. You saw that previously. You certainly saw that previously with the Clippers when they had they had Chris Paul and they had Blake Griffin, they had DeAndre Jordan. You saw that stuff. And you heard it even more with Paul George and Russell Westbrook. And listen, you're not going to get that on this team. There's no reason to have it with this team. So listen, I think that's what chased our pal over to the Lakers. Why am I totally blanking on his name all of a sudden? He was the Clippers.
Montrez?
No, he was the Clippers beat writer for the Athletic, and then went over.
Jovan Buha?
Yeah, Jovan. Listen, you remember those when Jovan was doing those exposés about the Clippers and the behind the scenes?
Well, at the end of that 1920 season, he wrote the big article for the Athletic.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And so it's one of those things that you're not going to get that anymore. You're not going to get that with this Clippers team, but you certainly will with Philadelphia. You certainly will with Denver. I mean, you'll see it.
There's going to be a real conversation because I think this is a possibility at this point, given how good Norm has been and how bad Paul George has been, that at the end of the year, we're going to look at the numbers and we're going to say the production is not matching the salary for these two guys. And there's a case to be made that Norman Powell is the better player at this point than Paul George.
Yeah. It's
That's
very
insane.
Yeah, it's very much possible. And you said earlier in the show, you look at the numbers and Norm's going to have a better season than Paul George. I mean, Paul George has a lot of catching up to do if he wants to match Norm Powell, and he's got to be on the floor as well. He's already gotten hurt twice. Norm Powell got hurt once, and he's already back from his hamstring injury. Embiid is not on the floor. But yeah, man, it's one of those things where Norm came in saying it gives shots to other dudes, and you're like, okay, cool. But it certainly gives you the team aspect a lot more than what we've seen previously with the Clippers. When you are a team, and that's what this team needs to be on the defensive end, especially, you can win ball games, because how often do we see in college basketball? The seniors come back and this team starts making a run. It's because everybody's on the same page. It has a very similar feel to this.
Lastly, Brandon, just how much are you enjoying watching Clippers basketball relative to what you thought it would be coming into this season?
Way more. I thought this season was going to be a complete write-off. I think the over-under was 37.5, I believe. I thought they would be just under. Matt Manawaran thought they'd be just over. I thought that this team was going to rely on Zoo and was going to rely a lot on Harden, and they were going to do as much as they could. I did not expect Powell to contribute this much. Didn't expect Derrick Jones Jr. to be this good. Didn't expect Chris Dunn to be this good. And I expect the defense to be this good. And when you're a fan, all you can root for is a team to give you their heart and soul every single night. And this Clippers team is giving you that every single night. So it's been an absolute delight to watch this team.
I never would have thought in a couple different categories they'd be this good.
Yeah.
They are the number one defensive rebounding team by percentage. Never would have thought that. They're top 5 overall in rebounding percentage, given their personnel and all the talk of, they need a power forward who can board but can also stretch the floor. Those talks have, come to a screeching halt now. I never would have thought that with their offense consistently being bottom 10, that their defense without Kawhi would hold up being top 5, because typically one affects the other, but they just continue to play hard. And that's what I'm most proud about. Like you're saying there, you just want a team that plays hard and gives you everything they got every night, and you can live with the results after that. And that's a team that Clipper Nation can get behind and root for. And we're seeing it right now. And I am damn proud of this squad. And it's feeling like this could be one of those Clippers seasons that we look back upon fondly and with a little bit of nostalgia, just like the 2018, 2019 team, or even the 2017, 2018 team that won 42 games somehow after trading Blake Griffin. Like, I am really happy with the way this team fights each and every night. And I don't see it stopping anytime soon because they've already been through some stuff.
Right. And you mentioned the defense, man. And I thought coming into the season, I thought the defense couldn't reach those heights because if your offense is missing as many shots as it is, it's going to be inevitable that your defense is going to feel the brunt of that when you're not able to set up defensively because you're missing shots. You're not able to set up your half court defense, but it hasn't been that way. So I've been really surprised with the results, and hopefully it keeps up because this team, and there's no reason why it wouldn't. As long as everyone stays healthy, because this team seems like they know what they're doing on that end of the floor.
The players like feed off of one another. Like, you got one guy playing so hard out there, and Chris Dunn, and then the next possession is Derek Jones Jr., and then it's Amir, or it's Norm, or it's Terrence Mann, or Jordan Miller now. Ivica Zubats. I don't know. It's just the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. They're elevating one another. It has been a joy to watch this team. Clipper Nation, I hope you're appreciating these guys going out and battling for you. They're 13-9, and they have a real shot. And if they can get Kawhi Leonard back healthy, I know that might be a long shot to do some damage in this Western Conference. And I didn't think I'd be saying that this early in the season. He is Brandon Marcus of the Talking Ship podcast. I'm Matt Mattawarren. Adam Oslin. Filling a little bit for Matt Mattawarren. Where can everybody find you one more time, Brandon?
At BD Marcus on Twitter. I'm also on Blue Sky, same exact handle. You can follow Matt at Matt Mattawarren. And of course, please go ahead and listen to our Talking Ship podcast. You can download us wherever you find your podcast. We come out with a new episode. We try to every single Monday. So this being a Monday, Matt is out. So Adam is filling in. And so if you're listening to this on the Talking Ship feed, hope you enjoyed it. This is a treat that we were able to do this simulcast on both your show and mine.
Brandon, thanks for doing this. Guys, this has been another edition of Clippers Talk plus Talking Ship.